Rats, Pizza, and Supply Closets by Adriana in the Snow. The rating for this fic is teen and up. Relationships are Virgil/Remus/Logan and Remus/Logan. Additional tags: non-consensual drug use, morally gray Logan, cop Remus, morally neutral Logan, being restrained, one theoretical mention of eye injury, and human trafficking mentioned. This is part 5 of the Cuffed universe. You can be looking forward to more parts coming soon. Summary. Logan is very surprised by the fact that Remus did not come to this pizzeria with the goal to capture him, and now that they're both here, it turns out that their objectives align far more than expected, aka the first truce. One would think if one even had a single iota of sense in one's monkey brain, that it would be difficult for a new hire to so quickly gain access to the location that one's underground drug-dealing operation ran out of. Particularly, one would think one would be cautious after having recently refused to pay for services from a cybercriminal. Luckily for Logan, it seemed Haynes had a few disconnected synapses in his brain, and all it had taken was a fake ID and some forged paperwork to get hired on as a handyman for the business he used for money laundering. In addition to his work doling out controlled substances, Haynes also owned a local ripoff of a Chuck E. Cheese called Cheesy the Cheese Rat. It was a dirty establishment with questionable food offerings and even more questionable decor. Many times this week, Logan had found himself distracted by the large mural of a rat made out of cheese, who was holding a smaller hunk of cheese as though he planned to eat it. Logan couldn't help but stare at the image in horror, his mind desperately searching for some meaning in the piece. Was it meant to be a visual representation of pantheism, wherein all things, no matter the way humanity views them, are ultimately the same and are God? That God is the creator, consumer, and consumed, and God is reality itself? Was it a commentary on thoughtless, damaging consumption, whereupon, in one's hunger and lust, one eventually consumes themselves, thereby destroying the vessel which one seeks to feed? Was the commissioner just deranged? Dude, for the 50th time, it's just a mural of a dumb character for kids, the woman standing at the counter in the middle of the kitchen said, as she sprinkled what could maybe pass for cheese on slabs of glorified cardboard the establishment called pizza crust. I don't know what to tell you. Just stop thinking about it and fix the sink. Logan tore his eyes away from the monstrosity he'd been staring at through the kitchen food window for the past minute and turned his attention back to the toolkit he'd been provided. He selected the correct tool and climbed back under the sink. He listened to the sounds of the woman continuing to make the pizza. Honestly, even if Logan did not know they were selling drugs out of the back, he may still have reported them to the authorities based solely on their food handling practices. In fact, perhaps the food was a worse offense, considering that those buying their drugs knew they were purchasing and consuming harmful substances. The underside of the sink he was under was disgusting, but the work wasn't difficult. He had learned enough about being generally handy from his father when he was young, and he had brushed up on those skills in the first apartment he'd shared with Virgil, as that landlord did not care enough to fix things in a timely manner. He still had his head under the sink when he heard footsteps enter the kitchen. He recognized Haynes's voice as soon as the man spoke. He was explaining a few things about how his operation ran to whoever else was there. He used vague terms, but it was still a rather risky move with Logan and the chef in the same room, though it was quite possible she was in on the drug selling as well. Logan finished fixing the sink without paying the conversation much mind. He already knew why he was here, and it was not to glean information. Logan intended to swipe what the man owed him, as well as a steep amount of interest for his trouble. Then he planned to send all of the information he had acquired about the business to local law enforcement and let them deal with the rest. He slid out from under the sink and glanced up. Immediately he met the eyes of one of the room's occupants and froze. He and Officer Remus Royal stared at each other for a few long moments before Remus tore his gaze away and looked back at Haynes. Logan breathed a sigh of relief that he wasn't stupid enough to attempt to confront Logan in front of the drug dealer. That would have very likely ended badly for them both. No longer being directly watched, though he imagined Remus was still tracking his movement from the corner of his eyes, Logan cleaned up his tools slowly and stood. His next task was to change a few light bulbs behind the stage of the animatronic show, and while things had inevitably just changed, he still planned to at least keep up appearances until he could come up with an escape plan. He left the kitchen and moved towards the supply closet. He stored the toolbox there, and his hand hovered over one of the screwdrivers for a moment, but he ultimately decided to leave it be. Remus was an inconvenience, but he couldn't see himself stabbing the man through the eye socket with a screwdriver. He turned to the box of light bulbs, wondering if he should take them with him, or just completely throw out any pretense of still intending to complete his handyman duties. That decision was made for him when the closet door suddenly opened. Logan tensed for a fight, mind analyzing the situation. He didn't have the element of surprise, and Remus was bigger, but it was a smaller space that was more familiar to Logan. For most opponents, he'd want to try to angle them away from anything that could prove a fatal or extremely harmful improvised weapon. But in all the times that Remus and he had fought in the past, the man always gentled his touch before it could do any true harm, and never applied excessive force. Logan had found himself extending the same courtesy. So in this case, the strategy would be to try to push him towards the more deadly weapons which he would be unwilling to utilize. Of course, Remus still had the advantage, as he was nearer to the door, and Logan was more pinned into the back of the closet. But there was also a light switch right next to Logan, and if he could turn it off... "What are you doing here?" Remus asked, the second the door closed behind him. Logan hesitated. "You seem surprised. Are you not tracking me?" His body language seemed to communicate that he didn't intend to jump at Logan in the immediate future, but Logan still eyed him suspiciously. "Believe it or not," Remus said, "I do have other jobs to do besides chasing you. I honestly did not expect to find you fixing a sink in a crappy pizzeria." "You're truly not here for me." "You sound hurt," Remus teased. "Apologies. I thought you knew this was an open relationship. I see other criminals all the time. Don't you see other cops?" "You are the only one who has ever been able to even partially keep up with me." "Well, I've been told I have quite the stamina," he said, eyes sparkling. Logan shifted slightly to the side, but stilled again when Remus's eyes immediately tracked the movement. "Stamina doesn't provide much advantage when stuck in a closet with your opponent," Logan said idly. "Oh, I'd beg to differ," he said lowly. "So why are you here?" he asked, instead of engaging. "I'm undercover to help bring down Haynes," Remus said. "He's into some even skeevier stuff than his rat-infested restaurant." "I'm aware," Logan said. "I was actually planning to send an anonymous tip to local law enforcement when I was finished here, though it seems that will be unnecessary now." "You were?" Remus asked. "Why?" "He owes me money, and besides that, he's an asshole." "Asshole might be an understatement for a human trafficker." "What?" Logan asked. Remus raised an eyebrow. "Didn't you know?" he asked, and suddenly the rat-themed restaurant for kids took on an even more dark, nauseating tone. "I wouldn't have done any work for him at all if I had even an inkling he partook in that business as well," Logan spat. "I'm taking him down even harder now." There was a moment of silence, where Remus considered him, eyes unreasonable and head slightly tilted. "So, we're both here for the same reason," he said. "I guess we are." "Huh." "If you attempted to arrest me, it would blow your cover," Logan pointed out and tilted his head. "And it would make my objective more difficult as well. Considering the severity of his crimes, would you be willing to make a temporary alliance, just to make sure Haynes gets what he deserves?" "Are you going to drug me at the end of it?" Remus asked. "We'll institute a 20-minute grace period after we're finished. You don't attempt to arrest me, and I don't attempt to incapacitate you after we complete our objective." Remus took a moment to think through the offer, and then shoved his hands in his pockets. "Deal." "Very well," Logan said. "So..." The closet door was opened suddenly by a figure in one of the restaurant's uniforms. "What?" he started, but Remus reacted quickly, grabbing the person and slamming his hand over his mouth. Logan leaned inside and shut the door once Remus had wrestled him inside. "Virgil?" Logan asked. "Oh! Hey, Virg," Remus said in surprise. "You're working at a pizzeria now?" Virgil tried to respond, but whatever he said was muffled by Remus's hand. "Oh, right," Remus said. "I'm going to uncover your mouth, but you have to promise not to scream." Virgil nodded vehemently. "Wait," Logan said, his eyes narrowed on Virgil. "He's lying. He's going to scream." Virgil shook his head in denial. "I know you, Virgil," Logan said. "I can tell when you're lying." There was always a crinkle between his eyes because he overcorrected on trying to look earnest. Virgil made a muffled whining sound in the back of his throat. "Look," Remus sighed, "I'll take my hand off your mouth. Don't scream, and we'll talk it out. Okay, Virgil?" Virgil nodded again, crinkles still prevalent between his eyes, and Logan pressed his lips together to watch. Remus slowly removed his hand from Virgil's mouth. There was a short moment of silence. Then, "Ah!" Logan slapped his own hand over the man's mouth when he started to yell. "I told you he was going to scream," Logan commented idly. Was the angry reply as he tried to fight against Remus's hold. Remus sighed. "I was trying to be nice to you, Virg. Now we have to gag you." Virgil's struggling increased, but Remus was easily able to hold him. Logan and Remus awkwardly managed to exchange their hands, so Logan was able to turn around and search the shelves for something to gag him with. "Here," Logan said. "This rope is still packaged, so it should be clean." Virgil whined in protest. "Well, it's either that or duct tape, Virgil, and I don't relish the pain that would doubtlessly result from the process of removing it." It was a struggle to get the rope between his teeth, but they managed it after a bit of wrestling. "Can I borrow your handcuffs?" Logan asked Remus. "This time he asks," Remus snarks, but handed them over. Virgil made muffled, irate noises behind the rope as he was cuffed to the metal shelving unit. Logan imagined whatever the man was trying to say was quite inspired. "Sorry, Virg," Remus said, patting him on the head. "See you later." They shut the closet door behind them, and Logan locked the door with the keys he'd been provided. He handed the keys to Remus. "You'll let him out after?" he asked. "Of course," Remus said. "I've got the email." Logan nodded and turned from the closet. "Let's go get a rat," he said darkly. That was the end of Rats, Pizza, and Supply Closets by Adriana in the Snow. This was part 5 of the Cuffed universe. The Cuffed universe has 10 complete stories within it so far, so you can expect 5 more, and hopefully more if there are more written.